Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Alpha TV episode, of course, brought to you by Aslex Page Academy, co-presented by Grace Apparel, IXL CIE Review Center, Farmbox, and of course, Pinoy IEs. And again, this is me, Felix Viroya, the founder and CEO of Aslex Page Academy, and I will be your moderator for tonight's learning session. Ayan, so tuloy-tuloy lang tayong matututo with Aslex Page Academy, of course, making you hashtag significantly better. Right, so good evening, everyone. We still have seats here at Zoom. We still have about 50 seats that are available. Just in any case that your colleagues and your friends will not be able to join us here at the Zoom session, please do let them know that this is also broadcasted via our YouTube channel at Aslex PH Academy. Both virtual locations are eligible for, of course, the e-certificate, which is the link will be provided towards the end of this particular session. Okay, so without further ado, let me, of course, introduce our speaker for tonight. Okay, excuse me, sorry. Our speaker for tonight is a graduate of UP Diliman with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering. Also, she got her master's degree from the same university, the degree on Master of Science in Industrial Engineering. She is a former operations research analyst at San Miguel Corporation and currently an operations research analyst in data scientist and restaurant systems officer at Jollibee for about 3 years already. She is a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and Green Belt trained professional, a certified Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, a certified digital marketing analytics professional, and a Scrum Master accredited or certified Scrum Master from the International Scrum Institute. All right, so napakadami ng kanyang mga accolades that actually led her, of course, to be one of our speakers for tonight's session about an exciting topic, no, on an introduction to Excel dashboards with Power Pivot and DAX. Yan. Let's all welcome with our virtual applauses none other than Engineer Sandi, DeLa Vega, CIE, MSIE, and Certified Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, and top 6 on the certification for industrial engineer examination. Ayan. So, Engineer Sandi, welcome po.
Thank you very much, Felix, for the introduction. Perhaps let me share my screen for the PowerPoint.
Sure. Before I fully turn over the floor to Ma'am Sandi or Engineer Sandi, make sure that you will be able to download the templates and files for tonight in the link provided in the Zoom chat. Ayan po. I'll be refreshing once then na bigay na ng instructions si Miss Sandi through the learning session proper. So Miss Sandi, the virtual floor is yours. I'll be out and I'll be back for the Q&A po.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can you see my screen? So, welcome to the introduction to Excel dashboards with Power Pivot and DAX. My name is Sandi de la Vega, and I help business owners in making sense of data and provide data-driven strategic decisions using tools like Excel. So, why Power Pivot and DAX? So, these are the powerful tools hidden in Excel. We just don't, it's not immediately available until you know where to find and how to use it. So, learning Power Pivot and Power Query is very powerful in your modeling your data and transform it to actionable insights. So, if you have this available Office version, Power Query and Power Pivot is already part of your arsenal in Excel. So by learning Power Pivot and Power Query and DAX, it will be easier to transition to Power BI, which is one of the leading tools in data visualization. So you're hitting two birds with one stone if you know Power Pivot and DAX. So DAX and if you can see M language and DAX, those are language of Power Query and Power Pivot. But don't worry, if you know basic Excel functions, you will be already familiarized with DAX. So just a little bit of tweak and practice, you can use it for your everyday analysis, and you can provide insights for the business owners. So just showing you the difference of pivot table and Power Pivot. So if you're used to pivot table, you can see you can only use one source data. However, the data, especially in business, it's stored in multiple database or multiple worksheets. So you need the power of Power Pivot to create relationships, and you can analyze easier. Of course, there are size limitation. Excel can only have 1 million row limit. However, with Power Pivot, depending on the RAM available with your PC, you can handle more than 1 million for your source data. And of course, there are special calculations you can use more for complex analysis using Power Pivot, such as these calculations. Of course, it will be easier to learn Excel by learning by doing. Don't worry, I won't call you immediately, but if you can follow along, it will be great since you will appreciate Power Pivot and DAX. If you cannot follow on, that's okay. We'll provide you the recording and maybe practice on your own using this recording. So using the raw data provided to you in the Google Drive, hopefully you can get the raw data, the raw sales data .xlsx. So let's have a role play. For example, you are hired in Office Plus California as a data analyst. So the company specialized in office products, but they decided to expand to sporting goods and arts and craft. So as a data analyst, you're given a task to create a dashboard with these following metrics. So like total sales, quantity sold online or at store, the distinct product count, or what is the distinct number of products they sold. So if even if they sold twice or thrice, it still counts as one. And the number of orders available in that department. So also, based on your initial gathering of requirements, these are the business questions you need to answer for your boss or for your internal customers, such as, are we outpacing our sales from 2021, from last year or 2020? What are the top 10 most popular subcategories per department? And what are the percentage of sales generated through online or through brick and mortar store purchases? So limited to top 10 products in terms of quantity sold. And are there products with negative margin percentage, meaning our cost is higher than the price we sold for? And which department, so that we can easily monitor these kinds of products. Now, what the first comes into mind when you see the data is, of course, to use pivot table. So if you see the data, let me, if you use the normal pivot table, you will be tasked to use XLOOKUP or maybe VLOOKUP and index match in order to create one pivot table, since you need one source data. For example, this one. However, you were provided, yeah, if you use Excel, VLOOKUP Excel, we will feel you're such a hacker and you already know how to combine this data. However, this is the best time to use Power Pivot and appreciate the strengths of the Power Pivot. So with the data provided by the IT department, you will see the data is separated with multiple worksheets like product worksheet, customer worksheet, and the transaction type worksheet. So you can use the DAX Power Pivot in order to combine all these worksheets into one. So upon looking at the data, we can say that we can answer the business questions, and we have designed our initial dashboard layout using the template provided. And if you follow along, this will be our final output of our dashboard. So by setting expectation, if you follow along this tutorial, you will learn or review the pivot table and the pivot charts, the Power Query, Power Pivot, how to join them without the use of VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP or index match using the relationships and Power Pivot diagram view, how to create the DAX or data analysis expressions and calculated columns, and how do you create the Power Pivot tables in order to create our dashboard. So first off, you need to set up the Power Pivot and Power Query. How to do that? If you download the main template, go to File, Options, you will see this Excel options pop up. Go to Add-ins, Com Add-ins, then go. You will see the Power Pivot here and other add-ins. But for this exercise, we'll just need the Power Pivot for Excel. Just check.
Sorry, Miss Sandy, sorry to cut you.
Sorry.
We cannot see the Excel screen. Sorry, we're still on the PowerPoint. If if you may, thank you.
All right. So let me start over for the Excel. So if you have the Excel template, can you see now my Excel screen? Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So go to File here, and then go to Options, Add-ins, then go to Manage. There's a drop-down list of COM add-ins, and press Go. And then you can see other add-ins here. Just press the Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel for this exercise. You can press everything else, but for now, we'll just need this one. And press OK. So you will see the difference in the ribbon. You will see the Power Pivot. So how to combine the data? Go to the Data tab. If you download the raw sales data, just press Get Data from File, from Workbook. Then download the raw, you select the raw sales data.xlsx, then press Import. So if you can see the navigator screen, these are the worksheets or tables available from the raw sales data.xlsx. So click the select multiple items. So if you click each table, you can preview the raw data from that Excel worksheet. So just for this exercise, just select table customer, table product, table trans type, and the sales that is not combined with any VLOOKUP or index match. So you need to select all these four and transform data. So the Power Query is processing all the queries by importing each workbook. And you will have this Power Query editor. If everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So you will see this Power Query. If the data is a bit dirty, you can have more transformation available, such as Transform tab here, Add column and view. But for this tutorial, we won't be diving to Power Query since the data is clean. What you just need from Power Query is just view if the data types are correct. For example, the date column are in data types, or the sales price is in decimal, such as like that. Before we close and load to, if there are two options, just select close and load to. Be very careful. Please select only create connection and add this data to the data model. So upon clicking OK, it will now process and place all these queries into Power Pivot. So if you can see in this data tab in queries and connection, all the tables and sales worksheet are now loaded to Power Pivot. So go to Power Pivot tab here and go to Manage. Press it. It will now load the Power Pivot window. So all the worksheets and tables you have selected are now can be seen in the data view, such as this. To proceed, we need to select data diagram view, and you can see each tables and worksheet here, like sales and trans type. So now we will create relationships between each table so that it will create a VLOOKUP-like function by, for example, customer number. Can you see it here? And the customer number in sales. So just by clicking cost number, drag it until customer number here in the sales table. It will create automatically the relationship, the one-to-many relationship, and that is the basic relationship from relational database. You can double click this.
Sorry, Miss Sandy. We're still on the PowerPoint of the dashboard.
Oh.
Sorry, Excel of the dashboard rather.
Hmm. Right. Can you see the power pivot?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So let me delete this relationship first. Hmm. I can delete it if I made a mistake. Or if not, I can use another relationship such as the product code in the table product. The closest window, I think the relationship between product table and the sales is the product num and product code. So select product code in the product table, then go to product num, just drag it correctly. Then it will now create another relationship from this table. Then another relationship such as trans type, select this trans type num, then go to the trans type num in sales table. So all of the tables are now connected with the one-to-many relationship, and it has a star schema layout. That is, you will find it in relational database. So for all this, you can double click. If you can see the relationship window, this is the edit relationship. You can find this customer number sales table is now connected for each of the customer table in the customer num column. And we can see it's active since it's the only relationship for each table. Oops. So going back to the Power Pivot window, you can now see the data view here. Before we proceed, to answer one of the questions like the total year-to-date sales, we need to create another table. By going to the data view, the design tab, then go to the date table here, then create new. By doing so, this will create a date table from all dates like January 2020 until the December 31, 2021 can be seen here in the date table. So just in case if the sales table has no sales, for example, January 2 to 2020, by filling up with the date table and create it back to the diagram view. Now select, you need to create the relationship from the calendar table to the sales table. So by clicking the date and then drag it to the sales table here at the date. Oh. Hmm. So there. So now it's been dragged. So all the tables are complete before we can proceed with the pivot table analysis. So let me close this Power Pivot window, change my share screen to Excel. So there. So now we have loaded all the data in the Power Pivot. How to use it in the pivot table? So go to Insert tab, go to the pivot table. Then you can see there's a different. Instead of just using select a table or range, select this use this workbook data model. Then you can choose anything if new worksheet or existing worksheet. Why is not loading? Wait a minute. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. My Excel seems to close. Let me just load it back. All right, here. So I have loaded the data table. So if you correctly follow the instructions in the Power Pivot window, upon selecting this insert pivot table, use this workbook's data model and existing worksheet, you can find the difference in the pivot table fields compared to the normal pivot table. So you can find multiple tables here available. And then if we try to drag, for example, sales, no, maybe quantity to the values, it will calculate the usual way of the pivot table of the total quality at total quantity per department. So by dragging that, if we go back to the pivot window here, and then the sales, we drag the total quantity to the values field. If we go to the advance and show implicit measures, you can find this one, the sum of quantity. So this is the implicit measure that we created by using the pivot table. So the problem with this these implicit measures, going back to the PowerPoint, the problem in this implicit measures is that you cannot reuse it for an additional analysis in the DAX. For example, yeah, you cannot use that the same one going back to the pivot table. For example, to calculate the quantity, for example, year to date in sales and for more complex analysis. So the advantage of this power pivot you can now find in the value field settings is the distinct count. So by choosing the distinct count and the product num, it will now calculate the distinct count of products per department. So that's what we need for our business questions. But to go further for our analysis, we need to create an explicit measure by going to Power Pivot window. Let me change my share screen here. Can now find we need to create these DAX measures. You can create here under the data view tab and the helper columns using the calculated columns. So going back to the PowerPoint, so the difference between the calculated columns and the measures is that you need the calculated columns that has row-wise operations. For example, in our data, we don't have sales already and the cost per order. And then we can use the measures for aggregation. Anything that requires sum or average that we need to aggregate for all the rows, the measures will be needed for our analysis. So going back to the Power Pivot window, so you can calculate here, for example, sales per order in the add column. First, click the add column here. It will be highlighted. And then you can now type, for example, sales per order. So this is the column name. Be very careful the calculations involved in this DAX. You will need colon equals, and then just multiply sales quantity. So sales quantity multiply by sales price, and just press enter. It will now automatically calculate for the quantity times sales price. So this is what we need to get the sum of the total sales. So in order to get the total sales, we go here below this line. That's critical to create the DAX measure. You can click anywhere, for example, here. Then just type total sales colon equals sum sales per order. So you're using this column and make it calculate the total sum for all these arrays. So just use the closing parenthesis and press enter. It will now automatically calculate this total sum of this sales per order. You can format it to number or perhaps currency in dollars so that it will be readable to Power Pivot. By going back to the Excel worksheet here, don't forget to save. We create another pivot table and maybe compare the total sales per order and the total sales here. So it's equal our measure for total sales and equal to the sales per order. Just be very careful of just using calculated columns since it will consume more memory in our Excel instead of just using the DAX measure, which is more efficient. So with this measure, it calculates every time depending on your filters. For example, filter by department or filter by month and for each department. So it's flexible for the DAX measure. Right? So going back, so that's for the total sales. Going back to the PowerPoint, to answer more business questions, we need to calculate more DAX measures such as total quantity, the distinct count, product, and number of orders. So these are the calculated columns. We already tried one, the sales per order and total sales. Now we just need to create more DAX measures such as total quantity, distinct count of product, and number of orders. Going back to the pivot window, let me bring it up. Here. Going back to the Power Pivot window, you need to create DAX measures. Here, and you can type anywhere. For example, total quantity colon equals sum. We'll start with the table name, then select the quantity here. Press tab in order to use IntelliSense, then closing parenthesis to complete the total quantity DAX measure. So you can format it with thousands operator and as a whole number since we don't have a decimal number of quantity of products. Next, the distinct count of products. Just type it here, distinct count of products, colon equals. There's a function called distinct count. And then use this sales product number since we just need the distinct count of products sold in per department. So press enter to complete this DAX measure. Format it as a whole number. There. So next would be the number of orders. Then colon equals. Use the count rows function. Then for the count rows function, the difference is you can use the whole table or the table name in order to count rows for the whole table. So press OK. I press enter to complete this DAX measure. Format it to whole number. Then we have completed the first set of DAX for our analysis. So next would be there. If you notice the naming conventions used in DAX, you can always see the how we calculate for the DAX measure is always with the colon and equals if you're typing it on the Power Pivot window. So there's another way to calculate measures going back to Excel. If you go to Power Pivot and Measures, Manage Measure, you can edit it here for additional DAX, or you can create new DAX measures. So it's a bit different. You don't need the colon. You just type here, for example, sum. And the sales name, the sales table, and what quantity. Then change the measure name here as total quantity. Maybe that's version 2. And check formula. So if there are no errors involved in the formula of our DAX measure. So we'll just cancel it since we already have the total quantity DAX. So there. So if you notice that we are using a helper column such as sales per order in creating the total sales, there's a way to make it simplified and combine it into one DAX measure, and that is the sum X. So the sum X is one of the iterator functions that returns the same expression, but it's just optimizing our whole DAX calculated measure into one formula. So instead of using these two formulas, you can use the sum X and it will provide you with the same results. So let's go back to our Power Pivot window. Instead of the total sales per order, let's edit it to sum X. Since it says table here, press type sales. And then you can type here the calculation involved. For example, sales quantity multiply by sales price. It will provide us with the same value of total sales. So let's save it for now. Going back to the Excel. Then if we save these changes, we can now delete the sales per order and it will not change the total sales since we don't need that sales per order anymore. So this is more efficient than using the calculated columns. The difference is just using the X instead of the sum just the sum function for the total sales DAX measure. So going back to our PowerPoint. So next set of DAX measures we need to answer our business question is to calculate, for example, the margin percentage. And in order to get the margin percentage, our data doesn't have the total cost. So we need to use more DAX. So you're now familiar with the sum X. We can use it for our DAX measure of total cost. Let's go back to the Power Pivot window. So just type anywhere here, total cost, colon equals sum X, using what table? The sales table. And what do we need to calculate for the total cost? If you can see, there's no cost column here, but we know there's a cost column in the product table. So how do we use that cost? So first, let's multiply it with sales quantity. Multiply. This is works like a VLOOKUP. This is the related function. Related, going to the table product and use the cost column to get the corresponding cost of each product number, since we use the relationship product num for the sales table and the product table. Complete this expression, and now we have the total cost involved for each for all the sales order. So change it to currency. So we have calculated the total cost. So if you're curious on if it really works that way, we can create a helper column of each cost. For example, here, want to double check if it's correct. Let's create cost of product, colon equals related, then table product cost. It will get the cost for each product. For example, OS 7030. Let's check in the product table. You can see it's the same, 38.53 for this product OS 7030. So we know it's correct using the related function, and it's easier than the VLOOKUP. We just know, we have to know this function related. So there, so now we have calculated the total cost. We check that if it's correct for the related function. We can delete this column since we don't need it for our analysis. And then what we need is the margin percentage. So the margin or the sales margin, that's just a difference of the total sales and cost divided by the total sales. So to do that, we create a new DAX measure, margin percentage. Remember the colon and equals to separate the column name and the formula. So what I'll introduce you another function called divide function instead of the divisor. So we will now reuse the total sales, since we already created this DAX measure, minus total cost, another DAX measure, divided by what's the denominator? Total sales. So complete this expression, so we can now find the margin percentage overall. Just format it with this percentage format so that it will be readable to the pivot table. So as easy as that, we created another set of DAX measure. So why divide? Just in case you have a data that is 0 or blank, if you just use a divisor, you will encounter errors, and it doesn't automatically handle the division by 0 cases. So by using divide, it will avoid those errors. So this is one of the best practice of DAX, is to remember to use divide instead of the divisor operator. Yeah. So next would be to answer another set of business questions. What we need is to answer are we outpacing our sales from last year and the percentage of sales. We need to calculate this new set of DAX measure, the year-to-date sales and the percentage of sales per transaction type. So why do we need that? Well, the year-to-date sales, this function will help us calculate automatically, for example, per month. I'll show you later in the pivot table. If we have 47K for January, it will carry over to February of the same year. So for example, 47 plus 59, with the total year to date, it will automatically calculate for each sales per month. So let us go back to the pivot window and use, let's create the total sales YTD colon equals total YTD. What is the expression that we will need? Remember the total sales, that's the DAX expression that we'll reuse. Then for this one, just refer for the dates as the calendar date table and using the date column. So let's change the format to $sign, save it first, then go back to the Excel pivot window. Let's check the impact of the total sales year to date. Let's remove this department, maybe the year, filter out to 2020. Then bring out the total sales YTD or year to date to compare the total sales and the total sales YTD. So you can see here, for example, January 2020, we have total sales of 57K and the total sales year to date is also 57K. But for February, you see the difference now that the total sales from January is added to the total sales of February and so forth. You can see the trend here for the total sales year to date. So it's a very useful function, especially for financial analysis, to use time intelligence functions such as total sales year to date. There are other functions like quarter to date and month to date if you need it for your financial analysis. So going back to answering our business questions, we need another DAX function, and that is the percentage of sales for each transaction type. But before we do that, we need to calculate for the total sales that will not be impacted by the filter of transaction type name. Let me provide you with the example first before we create that DAX measure. Let's bring out the transaction type name and remove the month. So you can see here, using the total sales only, it's change depending on our filters. So if we're gonna calculate for the margin percentage, we need to divide it to the total sales, 602 or 176K for the 2021 data. So we need a DAX measure that will disregard this filter of transaction type name. So to do that, let's try creating DAX measure in Power Pivot here and manage measures. Can you see this manage measure? Yeah. If you can see the manage measure, let us try to create a measure here using this measure window. So what we will need to create is a total sales of transaction type. Just type the measure name here. Yeah. And then you can type the formula here. The critical formula you will need is to use the calculate function. So the calculate function will have the expression and the filters. The expression that we will need is total sales. Then the filter, we will tell the DAX measure to ignore the online transaction type name or the store purchase filters by using all functions. So it will return all rows in that table and disregard any filters based on transaction type name. So closing parenthesis, oops, we need another parenthesis. There, you can use a check formula if we type our DAX measure correctly. Then if you want currency, we can change the format the same way in the Power Pivot window and press OK. So what is the difference in the, from the total sales? So let's select the total sales here. You can see we just calculate the total. We just get the total sales and disregard the transaction type name filter. So if we try to use another filter, it will not work the same way as the transaction type, since we did not tell the DAX to overwrite this filter. So be very careful of selecting the right filters if you want to divide it by transaction type name. But for our analysis, it will be sufficient using those using that DAX measure. So let's create now the percentage of sales based on transaction type by going to Power Pivot Measures, New Measure. We're using the same sales table, percent of sales per transaction type. This, remember to use a divide and then use the same total sales, since our numerator will depending on the filters. And what is our denominator? That is the total sales of transaction type, so that will disregard the filter by transaction type name. Check formula, it's correct. Change the currency to dollars. So now we can see, for example, here, our online purchase for 2021 as a total is 38% of all the sales, while the store purchase is around 62% from all sales for the year 2021. So going back, so now we have created all the DAX measures before we visualize the data. And we can now create each chart to complete our dashboard here. For example, the horizontal stock bar chart, line chart, and the pivot table to get the products to follow up on due to negative margin. So first, let's create a 100% stock bar chart using the DAX measures we have created. Going back to the Excel, let's create another worksheet. Let's first save before it created an error. Type this as calculation worksheet. Remember to use insert pivot table. Use this workbook's data model. Create. In order to create a pivot table, what we need is sales per department. So find the sales here, drag it to values, find the department, and drag it to columns. Then, as a review for others, or it will be a new learning to use the pivot chart, what we need is a 100% stock bar chart. Here, we'll use it for okay. There. So we have created our first chart using the DAX measure. If you want to create the slicers, what we need to do, find this year, and then you can right click, then press add as slicers. So by using slicers, it will automatically update our pivot table without the use of filters. Yeah. But since we need it for visually appealing, the problem with the slicers and horizontal stock bar chart, if you create a change in this format, for example, adding data labels and change the colors to make it visually appealing, it will also change if you create more change here in the chart. What we need so that it will be more robust is to use another cells and refer the values to this pivot table. For example, B3, and onwards. There. Then create a normal chart, the horizontal stack bar chart here. And if you downloaded the charts or the template, you can change this chart type, manage template, then use this single stack bar chart so that it will automatically change the format based on what I have provided. Remove the grand total there. So you can save time using the save templates if you downloaded from this from the Google Drive. In order to upload it to your Excel templates, if you check the all charts templates and manage templates, there's a folder that will have a pop-up. This is the folder. So remember the file path name for your Excel templates for your charts. So that will save time for you in formatting the chart for our dashboard. So now we have created this first chart using DAX. You can see any change to this chart will not go back to the default format even if we use the slicers. So let's transfer it to our dashboard template, add it to the sales distribution here, and maybe remove the label as our first part of our dashboard. So just edit it so that it will be visually appealing here. There. So next, let's create another chart. Oh, first, let's create the KPI scorecard using this text box we provided in the template. How to do that? Go to the calculation. I advise to copy this pivot table. As to why, the slicer connection is already copied from one pivot table to another if you copied our previous pivot table. What we need is additional chart here since we need the KPI to change per department. So find the department, add the slicer. You will now have another slicer for departments. So it will change for this at the pivot table instead of the previous one. So what we need, remember, going back to this dashboard, we need to calculate for the quantity sold online and quantity sold in store. To do that, let's look for the transaction type name and then use the total quantity DAX measure. There. So by checking the slicers, we can see it updates based on our slicer. But the problem with this, if you try to refer to that cell, it will create an error if you immediately refer that cell using pivot table. So in order to circumvent that, let's use the cell to refer to this pivot chart or pivot table. So such as equal to B11. And then use this cell reference and equate it back to the formula bar of this text box. For example, equals, this is online, right? Yeah, equals D11. So that's the quantity sold for online. So do the same for other text box. Refer to the calculation D12. So now we can change it from using this slicer. It will calculate dynamically based on our filters. So next set is to calculate for the distinct count of products and the number of orders. Going to the calculation for each, don't need distance type number. We just need distinct count of product and number of orders. Use the values here as rows, then do the same to refer it to use an additional cells to refer the values of the pivot table. So distinct count of products is in D18. So select this text box, type in the formula bar, refer to calculation D18 for the distinct count of products. And for the number of orders, calculation D19. Oops. You have to type it in the formula bar to make it work. So there, we have completed the scorecards for our dashboard. Next would be the total sales year to date. Let's double check if, okay, the two pivot tables are reflected here in these slicers. Next would be the year to date. For this pivot table, we don't need the year slicers since we will compare the year 2020 and the year 2021. To do so, let's remove other fields in the pivot table. Find the year we want to compare it and use as columns. Remove the filter connection. Use total sales year to date and the month name or just month. There. Then insert pivot chart, maybe the line with markers. And then if you download the template, we can change the design using templates and green and red line chart. So it will now load our recommended design for this dashboard. So if you can see, our basic calculation of the total sales year to date has a flat line since our calendar table has a date for May to December 31, 2021. So if you want to change it to more visually appealing dashboard, you want to stop that line from April since we don't have data point in May, you can go back to the Power Pivot window. And change the total sales year to date with this formula. Calculate function of total sales. And then we filter. This filter function will help us create new complex filters. So by using all function, all of the calendar rows, you filter it by calendar year. It should be equal to max calendar year. So don't worry if it seems complex, but what just this mean is that if it's for the sales date this year, it should match and do not calculate for the 2021. The 2020 data should not carry over to 2021. So that's what it means. Use double ampersand if you want to have end filters. And the calendar date should be less than the max of the sales date, meaning if we only have until April data, do not calculate until December 30, 2021. So there, go back to the pivot window. You can see the line chart has been updated only to April 2021. So that's what we need. So just copy this and paste it to our dashboard. So over here, remove this blue rectangle, and you can now place the line chart sales year to date. There. So next, let's create the top 10 subcategories. So this time, copy from the previous pivot table since we need 2 slicers. We need the subcategory and total quantity. Yeah, that's what we need. For this department, let's remove the filter department. So you can see if overall are selected, it's more than 10. So what we need to do is to use the value filters and choose the top 10 based on what? Based on total quantity, since that's a business question. Then if you want to sort it from smallest to largest, just right click from the total quantity field, then use sort, then use sort smallest to largest value. As to why, let's create the horizontal chart. It will create this format where the largest is at the top and the smallest is at the bottom. So yeah, it seems reverse based on our pivot chart. Now use the design from the Google Drive I provided there. So to automatically format it and save time for our data visualization, copy paste our chart here below the top 10 subcategories by total quantity sold. So that's for our third chart. Let's create the percentage of sales of top 10 products online versus store purchase. So going back, yeah, let's just copy this pivot table. Then use the total sales as values. Remove the filters. Oh, since we need the top 10, we just change the filter based on sales, total sales, then use transaction type name as columns. We need top 10 products, so change the subcategory to product name as our rows. Then, we need the percentage. Using the percentage of sales per transaction type DAX measure, change our format since we change it to currency. Oh, let's see, should be top 10. Total sales, there. Change this format to percentage. Then create our horizontal stack bar chart, 100%. So you will have this. Sort by smallest to largest. Then use our design provided in the template using the multiple stack bar chart template. There. So now we have created and see for each product name what are the percentage of sales bought by online or store purchase. So copy it to our dashboard and place it under that header. So now we have created the fourth chart of our dashboard. Lastly, we need the products to follow up using a pivot table. So just copy this one. What we need is product name. So we need the negative margin percentage. So let's use the margin percentage DAX and remove the transaction type. This time, instead of value filters, let's use the label filters. We need negative margin. So let's use less than 0. Oops. Sorry, you use the value filters, then use the less than. Margin percentage is less than 0. So you'll find this one. So these are the product name with negative margin percentage. Let's sort it. Smallest to largest. Use the same column. Maybe change the design of the value should be in columns there. So why do we need this? We want to recreate the conditional bar formatting. So by selecting the margin percentage, go to conditional formatting and select the red bar chart. If you want to remove the table, the values, just go to the conditional rules manager, edit rule, then show bar only. So there. Don't know why it's included here. There we have a pivot table for negative margins. Just copy paste. Let's remove this one and paste it here. So we have the products to follow up. Maybe just hide the headers or change it in the pivot table analyze, then hide field headers. So that we have completed our dashboard. Let's just place our slicers here at the top left. Calculation, our slicers. Then place it here, remove this one, paste our slicers, and then just place it correctly in our dashboard. Save. So now we can see our whole dashboard that changes based on our slicers, and that is dynamic. So we can see here from our business question, if we select the 2021 or celebration, we can find that we are outpacing our sales when we look at celebration department. But in other departments, it seems we're not outpacing our sales. And there are products we need to follow up on since it's negative. For example, here, negative 35%. So for our drum kit hardware, and our top sales are going to store purchase based on 2021. But from 2020, possibly due to pandemic, we have lots of online purchase from these departments. So there, you have created your very first dashboard using DAX and Power Pivot techniques. So there are potential improvement. For example, this dashboard, if you want to create a dynamic measure, you want to change it to line chart, and there are other measures you can explore depending on the business questions. So by following along this tutorial, you have already reviewed or learned how to use pivot table and pivot chart, how to create relationships using the Power Pivot diagram view, how to create the DAX measures such as the sum X, divide related, and discount, and maybe the total year to date, and also created Power Pivot tables using from the data model. And we have created our very first basic dashboard using the layout and template provided. So there are more DAX functions you can explore, especially the has-one value and switch. That's one of the powerful DAX measure if you want a more dynamic dashboard. However, the very least, you have if you follow along, you now know DAX and Power Pivot, which is usually if you get trainings from outside, which is usually expensive, and you learned it for free by following this tutorial. So I would like to ask, how's everyone feeling? Are you feeling enlightened that you know Power Pivot, or very excited that you can use it for your job or project, or information overload, but you're still okay in following this tutorial? So thank you very much, and I hope you keep learning the Power Pivot and DAX. You can connect with me through this LinkedIn link if you want to maybe ask more questions about DAX and or Power Pivot. Maybe I can help you if you want to. So that's all, guys. Thank you very much.
Wow. So thank you, Engineer Sandy, for that. Of course, a crash course on how to create dashboards. Okay. And how to create dashboards through this powerful thing called Power Pivot and DAX, or again, what DAX means, data, sorry,
Data analysis expression.
data analysis expressions. All right. So I guess our the expression coming from this audience is a bit overwhelming since this is actually a crash course. Engineer Sandy was able to showcase, of course, what's the difference between the usual pivot table, okay, and how basically Power Pivot and DAX actually works alongside with each other, and how we can use that to create powerful dynamic, no, as I may call it, dynamic dashboards for you and your organization. Well, the thing here is that you know the dashboards, I mean, there are other, of course, softwares that you can use. We have Tableau, we have Power BI. Engineer Sandy mentioned that earlier. But of course, as we may already know, Excel is one of the go-to tools of businesses coming from of all sizes. I would say I was able to work with MSMEs, I was able to work with multinational corporations, and actually Excel is one common thing that that they are actually using. Some organizations would avail or could avail things like or softwares like Power BI or Tableau, but other organizations cannot. But if you talk about Excel, this is something that is, very common across all levels of organizations. So that's why it's good to learn things about dashboards, or creating dashboards through Excel, empowered by this Power Pivot and DAX. Now we now have some time for two or three questions. If you might have some questions, and we'll try to answer that before we go to the last part of our session tonight. Don't worry, you will be having a copy of this via the Alpha Digital. Engineer Sandy here approves it that it will be available as an e-learning course. So if ever you were not able to, follow through all throughout the session, don't worry. You'll have time to repeat and, to perfect this particular tutorial via our Alpha Digital platform. So maybe it will be available at maybe a week or two, so that you can, access it again and again and again. All right. And of course, before I forgot, we will be having a premium course about dashboards and such, including this topic and other topics that might be related to that. Maybe some touch points on maybe Google Data Studio, or even Tableau or Power BI. So watch out for that, and we'll be running that, of course, with the guidance and leadership mentorship of Engineer Sandy here. Okay, I'm seeing a question here from MJ Mapalo. Engineer Sandy, here's the question: what problems did you encounter in Power Pivot, especially using in business or maybe in actual, what maybe I don't know if MJ is he or she, but MJ may be talking about actual data coming from an actual business.
Well, the actual data in business is usually very dirty. So Power Pivot assumes it's already clean, especially the one is to many relationship and the data model. So you might need to you explore first what is our raw data. Our our example here is we assume it's clean, but it's hardly clean in the usual data from businesses. So maybe you can explore first and check the contents of the data. And then if it's already clean, then you can use Power Pivot immediately. But if it's not clean, maybe you can ask SQL programmers since it's big data, or you can explore using Power Query, the one I showed. There are many ways to transform, especially pivot. If you can see, there are data that you need to unpivot before you need to connect using other tables. So maybe Power Query can help in cleaning the data. So that's very one. If for with dirty data, it's garbage in, garbage out, and that's the same through for the Power Pivot.
All
So I
right.
hope that answers your question, MJ.
Yeah. Thank you, Engineer Sandy, for that answer, and I agree to that. Right? It's basically if your data is, dirty, or it has so many erratic entries or errors on that, missing values and such, that will definitely affect your calculations moving forward. So it's highly suggested that we clean our data. Well, data cleaning is one of the part, I would say, that takes too much of time in terms of making sense of the data. It's not really about the analysis or such, or visualization, or applying or models and such, but I think it's really understanding your raw data and making sure that it is clean, so that whenever you use it for further analysis, it will give you the insights that you are looking for, right? Thank you, Engineer Sandy, for that, and MJ for that particular good question. What other questions do you have? We can accommodate maybe at least one or two for the benefit of time being that we have right now. Right? Okay. Are there any other questions? Um. All right. So am I seeing questions here? Right. So you still have like a minute or two to try to ask that question. But if you if you haven't formulated your question yet, okay, feel free to connect with Engineer Sandy via LinkedIn. So I've known Engineer Sandy via LinkedIn. We had a good call last year. It didn't took off, maybe because of the schedule, but finally we were able to have a tutorial coming from Engineer Sandy. So please connect with Engineer Sandy via LinkedIn. So you can see her name here. It's just, I think that's the same with what is appearing on her LinkedIn account, if I'm
And
not
same
mistaken.
picture.
All right. And the same picture. Okay, so I guess with the benefit of time being, we will be saying goodbye for now to Engineer Sandy. So Engineer Sandy, thank you for this great tutorial on Power Pivot and DAX, on the use of this tools, in Excel for creating dashboards. Really appreciate your time, and I'm gonna talk to you soon offline. I mean, off the session. So let's send our appreciation to Engineer Sandy before she leaves the session through our chat box, okay? So that she can still see these messages coming from your end. All right, so
Okay. Thank
thank
you
you,
very
thank
much for
you.
the opportunity.
You are always welcome to go back here, of course. And of course, please make sure that you will be subscribing to our channels for the paid course on data visualization, brought to you by, of course, Engineer Sandy de la Vega. Okay, so for those, thank you again, Engineer Sandy. So for those who are waiting on how to, um, claim the e-certificate, of course, there will be some announcements that has to be made for that. And starting off, of course, with by asking you guys to follow our pages, our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, our YouTube channel at Aslex Page Academy. They're all named Aslex Page Academy. And you can actually take courses from our e-learning platform, our own e-learning platform called Alpha Digital at aslexph.com. So if you're here, you're from a corporate, or you're from an NGO, you're from an MSME, we are actually looking for partners who will utilize our e-learning platform. So by being a partner, you will be getting access to our free e-learning courses and some exclusive contents for partners. So we're open for corporate partnerships, brand partnerships, community partnerships, and we have a lot of resources that we can provide if you become one of our partners. Okay, so you can actually use this for the individual development of your employees if you're from the corporate. Okay, and for if you're a brand, so you can actually have this as one of the benefits of your customers. So we have our Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt certification starting tomorrow. So for those who have a tight schedule on registering for this month's schedule of our Yellow Belt, we will be having for next month. So it's happening monthly, every last two weekends of the month for our Yellow Belt. For our of course, for our Yellow Belt self-paced without live online classes, it's still on sale. For our green belt with live online classes, this will happen again March 19 to April 17. We are now on the mid part of the ongoing green belt program. And for our self-paced green belt without live online classes, it's actually rated at 14,990. So you can have this. This includes free yellow belt, of course. Both our self-paced and, of course, our live online classes format. Now, if you're up to the game of being a black belt, we will be opening again our black belt session on May 7th to June 26th. This will be the second for this year. We are on the mid of the program for the first batch for this year. You want to learn more about data analytics and such? We have a data science program leading to being an alpha certified data analyst, which started February 12th. And of course, we'll be having this by next quarter and moving forward. So it's rated 80,000, but now being offered at 15,000 pesos. If you're a project management enthusiast and you think that you need to reconcile and recalibrate things about project management, we are now offering project management fundamental certification. The next run will happen February 26th from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, and you'll have a chance to get certified and get free project management templates worth $100. If you're into Kaizen, we are inviting you to the next run of our Certified Kaizen Professional happening on March 26 and 27, 8 a.m. to 12 noon. This is still on sale for 50% off. If you're into quality management, we are inviting you to join the Certified Internal Quality Auditor, tentatively happening on March 5 to March 26 every Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Still rated at 50% discount. If you are here and if you have friends that would like to join our programs, you can invite them to join as a group of 5, but only pay for 4 packs or 4 persons. That's an automatically 20% rated discount. So of course, we are still actively looking for partners, brand partners, community partners, corporate partners. So whatever type of partnership you might want to explore with us, please let us know by sending us an email at info@asklikespeech.com or simply sending us a Facebook message via our Facebook page. We're looking for ambassadors. This is for individual level. And if you happen to be an interested ambassador to earn referral incentives and such, so you might want to send us a message also via our Facebook page. Our friends from iExcel are also inviting you to take the iExcel online review courses. You can check that under online-iexcel-CIE-review. Friends from Farmbox are inviting you to buy their boxes so that they can help farmers to continue their farming activities. So this is Farmbox helping one Filipino farmer, one box at a time. And also our friends from Grace Apparel is inviting you to check on their good designs and great t-shirt designs on their Shopee and Lazada store. And you can also check their Facebook page for more information. And of course, this is now the time that you are waiting for. You can actually, check the evaluation form in this link. Please try to get a screenshot of this page as we are actually moving on within the next 30 seconds on the last page. So please copy the link or take a screenshot so that you can, scan the QR code. Okay. So I guess that's going to be all for tonight. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us. It's been a fruitful 1.5 hours with you. Again, thank you, Engineer Sandi, for your time and effort for tonight's session. I firmly believe that these individuals who have attended your session was overwhelmed of the functions that Excel has that we may not know at this point in time. But of course, this is a good start if they really want to explore using Excel for their dashboards. Thank you, everyone. And of course, let's continue to be #significantly better together. Bye, everyone. See you again next Friday. Bye.